It's extensive, it's not that available to the public. Diane, do you have anything to add to that? I'm
Well,
sorry, Heather, we'll get to you.
our archivist, Leslie Willis Laurie, she's been working with the Clef Club.
Oh,
So,
Like once a couple times a year she goes, right? to-
well, for a while, she was going there, down there quite a bit, so,
So I don't know if you heard that, Diane was saying, the archivist at the Bloxon, Leslie Willis Lowry, has been working with the Clef Club on the archives. But I know myself, I've been through them, they're extensive and they're very complete and extremely rich. I don't think they're really that available to the public right now. But Heather, I'm sorry, Heather.
So I just want to get some order of operations thing clear in my own head. So it's the case that the LOI has been submitted
Yes,
and that it could be still accepted, and that there is a window of opportunity within there to potentially move forward in the same way that everybody
Right.
kind of
Yes.
originally, okay. So if it's not accepted, kind of game off, and we would have to
Start
go
over.
back a different time anyway. We may not switch fiscal sponsors at this point, though, correct?
Correct.
Right. So I think it's a little early in that case to be talking about any other fiscal sponsors at this point. And that it seems like the only thing that we could do at this point would be to make sure, like, whatever way that it is most amenable to everybody to go forward, try to find out, a little bit more detail on what the conversation and objections were. But they may not be surmountable just given what Homer raised, which is that no matter who is the fiscal sponsor, no matter what, shape the archive took, this is a much larger thing that has to exist for a much longer time. And so if we have to wait in order to make sure that there is that $1 million endowment, to make sure that everything is okay in perpetuity, that seems to me like the responsible thing to do on any number of fronts.
I agree with you completely, except that there's money that we were given to, and the money's gonna run out, and there's not gonna be any money really to move forward. We'd all have to do it sort of on a volunteer basis.
Well, let me put one thing in here, Heather, is the way I was looking at this whole process was once we got the money from Pew, with Pew's imprint on it and the $300,000, that gives us a way to draw in other people with their money. If you're just going out and asking people, and they're gonna say, well, didn't you have a thing with Pew and Discovery Grant? What happened to that? Why didn't they wanna give you money? That kind of stuff. So that was why I thought that this was a good route to take, because you don't have it is chump change. But it is a start, and with that, I mean, it's a big enough chunk that other investors and people that want to get involved, especially that most of the funders now are very cognizant of the fact, because there have been reports of the low level of funding for African American projects at all around the country, and so you have these major funders who are rethinking their money allotment process because of that. So. Getting this amount of money would help to parlay that into larger grants or even just fundraising campaigns.
Well, just to build on that, though, I mean, for the Clef Club, because they are doing a capital campaign and they are going to be, raising money, it might be an opportunity then to, like, if we can talk to the board, if we can find out what would make them comfortable to add this onto that and say, we're raising money for the building, including the Philadelphia Jazz Archives, and that opens the door to a lot more money nationally that might come into a local institution, which is something that we need.
That would get their attention. That's kind of what I'm thinking. I mean, there may be a way to massage this.
Right.
To present this in a way that, it is.
Where it does
beneficial
align with
for
their
them.
strategic
I've
plan.
been involved
Yeah,
with Clef Club since it
exactly.
opened, from a volunteer to a curator of programs, both concerts, educational series, what have you. I will say, despite losing Don and, there still may be a model that's forming there amongst the staff. Despite, everything that's transpiring right now, I would say, just from having that perspective as an insider, right now, I think things are more stable with Ann Edmonds there than I've ever seen it. I emceed an event there recently, and Kenyatta Johnson handed out a $100,000 check to the Clef Club. I thought it was going to be a check for $5,000 or $10,000. It was $100,000.
Yeah, and they're waiting on big money from the state,
so
too.
I think more than I've ever seen it. at the Clef
But
Club.
why wouldn't this is one question that's bothering me. Why wouldn't the board be able to see
But you can't.
that sort of $300,000 could generate
It's,
more?
Yeah,
they
but again,
might,
it
they
might
might
not
with more
be-
conversation.
Yeah.
It might not be,
That's
you
the
know,
thing.
just purely the logical side of it, but
It's how
again,
it was
that,
presented.
that personal side,
Right.
that they weren't in on it
Right.
ahead of time.
Okay.
That, you know, again, they were caught off guard, you know, and, you know, maybe saw it some way, you know, affecting the potential, again, looking down the road.
Usurping their
How it's gonna
authority.
continue to be funded and what, you know, so again, maybe if we can find a way, you know, to re-establish that connection with the board, you know, bringing in Lovett, bringing in Helen, whoever, and approaching the board and say, you know, there are long-term positives associated with
Yes.
this. And, you know, and maybe having Pew, you know, the president saying, hey,
Well, it's the head of the,
or whoever.
yeah.
But whoever,
Maybe.
you know, that may be, you know, saying, hey, we think this is worthwhile. We see, again, the benefits. We're trying to help the African-American community, the minority communities. So maybe this coalition, you know, approaching the board may be able to find that.
All right, well, let's build on that. Jack, I mean, do you think Bill would go to a meeting with the board? If we could set that up fairly quickly?
I don't know about a
with-
meeting, but he certainly said he would be willing to call them. I mean, first things first, we gotta hear if the LOI got approved, but let's assume that it was, or is.
I think it will be.
But, and we'll know that in a day or two, literally. So, assuming it is,
Can we get J. Michael and Diane? Maybe we can get a bunch of us to go
Gerald as head of Jazz
And-
Village.
Yeah, Gerald.
And I would
We-
still reach out to
Well, where?
Dr. Watson.
to meet with the
To meet with
board.
the board.
But
But how
Yeah.
do you go
that's
in?
the letter that
You
Jack
can't-
needs to, or
If you can
or
get a meeting.
you or Jack need to send back to Ken Scott.
Hmm?
You know, in response to the letter, send a nice letter back to Ken Scott, requesting a meeting with him first, you know,
Okay.
the president of the board, and then,
Yeah,
take it
and
from
I
there.
will draft it and send it to everybody if you all wanna.
Sign it?
offer some- I mean, I don't want 15 people trying to edit a letter, but I mean, if everybody has some input and some language that they think would be helpful, and then maybe a small contingent of us would go meet with them, I would. be happy.
Diane, did you say draft, send the letter after?
No, I said,
LO
In
Initially.
response.
He sent a letter to me.
I know,
Yeah.
but the letter, should you wait for the LOI?
Well, literally, that's. a day or two,
Okay,
so
all right.
By
So
the
you can be
time we draft the letter,
Okay.
we'll know. And in fact, if the LOI isn't approved, then there's no point in proceeding. But I would love for a contingent of you who feel like you can maybe be more persuasive or more influential than me. I'd be, you know, happy to have a small.
I think, because this group has been doing this since August, people from this group sitting with the board would be able, not just to convince them, but to show them how important this project is, not only to the Cleft Club, but the community as a whole, you know, and,
Maybe trying to address their specific concerns. That's the first, you know,
Right.
as well.
yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
trying to have answers to their questions.
And to acknowledge that there was a misunderstanding about where we were in the process,
Right.
And
right?
Jack, what
Yeah.
type of detail did you go into as far as the budget, the timeline? Was it
We
gonna
don't
start
do-
out as a digital archive and then kind of grow into a brick and mortar physical archive? Like what
At
type
the
of
board
detail?
At the
meeting or
board
at
meeting.
the
At the
LOI?
At the board meeting.
At the board meeting.
We didn't, well, the only thing was they asked, so let me backtrack. The LOI, which they had a copy of, you know, that they all read, or they had it anyway. In the LOI, you don't have a specific budget, you just have a general figure that you're asking for. At the next stage, the full proposal stage, is when you have to, you know, go into detail in the budget. So we were just saying, we're asking for the max, 300,000.
But you,
Now,
can I just say something there? You won't be able to, as far as I understand, you won't be able to ask for 300,000 because.
we did.
But the fiscal sponsor, it's a percentage of their budget. And from what I can tell, the Cleft Club has a budget of about half a million, a little less than $500,000. That would mean that the maximum that you would be able to ask for would be 225, 250.
Oh, okay, well, they didn't,
that's-
the Pew folks didn't raise that issue, so I don't.
But it is, well,
Okay.
what they will do is take an average of the last 3 operating years, and actually, that's gonna be even lower than, I think, $500,000, and then you can apply for up to half of the average of the expenses for the last 3 operating years.
But answer the question about what did you,
All right,
was
so-
it
Yes,
just
I'm
you
sorry.
at the board meeting, you,
Yeah.
Helen, and Lovett?
Yes, and Ann.
And Ann?
Right.
Okay.
So, they were, I just gave a little, I started with just a little presentation on what the project's about, what its
You had a
goals are.
PowerPoint, or you just?
No,
talking?
I was just sitting around the table like this, and, what our goals were, what the history of the Discovery Project and all that. And then the treasurer, whose name I don't remember, who seemed to be really focused. He had read everything. You could tell he was asking very informed questions. He said, what happens after the grant? And I said, well, the Clef Club, we would have to find money to keep the program going, on a sort of permanent basis. And he said, well, what would that cost? And I said, well, an ideal scenario would maybe be like $100,000 a year, which would be like a full-time archivist and money for supplies and equipment and programming and all that. I said, but, it could be half that, on a sort of a bare bones. And that's what he kept coming back to. He says, well, that's what I keep coming back to. Where are we going to get that money? So it was the concern about what it would cost them after the grant ran out.
And if their budget, as you suggested, may be around 500,000, so when you said maybe 100,000, that he's thinking, well, this is 20% of our
Yeah.
budget for something that we never signed off
Right.
on.
But again, I quickly, I could see, he went, I said, well, yeah,
The
but you
damage
could do it for
already
half
been
that.
done, right.
You could do it for much less than that. I said, with all the bells and whistles, if you had a full-time staff person and money for operations and programming and, all that, digitization, because we're talking about all kinds of programs that might come out of this. So I said, that'd be the best-case scenario, but you could do it for half. And, that's still concerning.
Still,
That-
still
that,
10% of the budget.
Yeah.